She thought he was just a quiet gardener across the street. Please rate this story from 1 to 10. Tell us where you are watching from, and share, if you have, a similar experience. Subscribe for new stories every day. Let's begin. Emma stood behind the counter of her small cafe and stared at the rain streaking down the window. The cafe was empty again. It had been empty for 3 days straight. She wiped down the same spot on the counter for the 5th time that morning. The tile was already spotless, but her hands needed something to do. The rent was due in 2 weeks, and she was short by almost half.
I can figure this out. I always figure it out.
But her voice sounded hollow, even to her own ears. She had opened this cafe 5 years ago with money from her late grandmother. Back then, the neighborhood was quieter, and rent was cheaper. Now luxury apartments were rising on every corner, and the landlord kept raising prices. She walked to the window and pressed her forehead against the cool glass. Across the street, an empty lot sat overgrown with weeds. It had been empty for as long as she could remember. The bell above the door chimed. Margaret shuffled in with her usual purple umbrella. She was 78 years old and had been coming to the cafe every morning for 4 years. Margaret shook out her umbrella and hung it by the door.
Good morning, Margaret. The usual.
Margaret smiled and settled into her favorite corner table. Emma brought over a pot of chamomile tea and a blueberry scone. Margaret looked at her with knowing eyes and told her she looked tired. Emma tried to smile and said she was fine. Margaret said young people always said they were fine when they were falling apart. Emma sat down across from her and admitted the cafe was struggling. Margaret patted her hand and said difficult times had a way of bringing unexpected help. Emma wanted to believe her, but the bank account did not lie. Margaret finished her tea and left a generous tip as always. Emma watched her walk away with her purple umbrella bobbing in the rain. The next morning, the rain had stopped. Emma arrived early to open the cafe. She unlocked the door and stepped inside. The familiar smell of coffee and cinnamon greeted her. She turned on the espresso machine and started her routine. Through the window she noticed movement in the empty lot across the street. A man in worn jeans and a faded green work shirt was clearing weeds. His truck was old and rusted and parked at an angle. Emma watched him for a moment. He worked methodically, pulling weeds and tossing them into a pile. His shirt was soaked with sweat even though it was barely 8 in the morning. She made a pot of coffee and walked outside. The morning air was fresh after yesterday's rain. She crossed the street carefully, balancing the coffee pot and 2 cups. The man looked up as she approached. His face was smudged with dirt, but his eyes were striking. They were a deep brown that seemed to catch the light.
I thought you might want some coffee. You've been working since sunrise.
He straightened up and wiped his hands on his jeans. He looked surprised but grateful. He introduced himself as Daniel and thanked her. Emma poured coffee into both cups. They stood there in the weeds, drinking coffee and watching the morning sun break through the clouds.
This lot has been empty for years. Someone finally bought it. I'm hired to turn it into a garden.
Emma asked what kind of garden. Daniel said it would be a community space with flowers and benches, maybe some vegetable patches for local families. Emma felt something warm spread through her chest. The neighborhood needed more green spaces.
That sounds beautiful. We could use more beauty around here.
Daniel smiled and said beauty was often hidden under layers of weeds. They finished their coffee, and Emma returned to the cafe. She looked back once and saw Daniel already bent over his work again. Days turned into weeks. Daniel came to the lot every morning just after sunrise. Emma started bringing him coffee as part of her routine. They would talk for 10 or 15 minutes before she had to open the cafe. Daniel told her about his life working different gardens across the city. He said he grew up poor and learned to work with his hands early. Emma told him about her grandmother and the cafe and how much it meant to her. Margaret noticed the daily coffee deliveries. One morning she asked Emma about the gardener across the street. Emma said he was just a nice man doing his job. Margaret raised one eyebrow and said nothing, but her smile spoke volumes. Emma felt her cheeks grow warm. One afternoon, Daniel knocked on the cafe door. It was a slow day, and Emma was reorganizing the pastry case. She opened the door and Daniel stood there holding a small pot with a green plant.
I thought your cafe could use some life. It's basil. You can use it in your cooking.
Emma took the pot and felt touched by the simple gesture. She invited him inside for the first time. Daniel looked around at the cozy space. The walls were painted a soft yellow, and old photographs hung in mismatched frames. He told her it felt like a real home.
That's what I wanted. A place where people could feel welcome.
Daniel sat at the counter, and Emma made him a sandwich. They talked about small things, favorite foods and childhood memories. Daniel mentioned he had a sister who lived upstate. Emma said she was an only child, and sometimes felt lonely.
Loneliness is different from being alone. You can be surrounded by people and still feel lonely.
His words hit something deep in Emma's chest. She had felt lonely for years, even in a full cafe. After her last relationship ended badly 3 years ago, she had built walls. Daniel seemed to understand without her having to explain. Margaret came in and interrupted their conversation. She looked delighted to see Daniel inside the cafe. She sat down nearby and ordered tea. Daniel finished his sandwich and thanked Emma. As he left, Margaret told Emma he seemed like a good man. Emma agreed but said she barely knew him. Margaret laughed and said sometimes the heart knew faster than the head. Emma changed the subject and asked about Margaret's grandchildren. Margaret went along with it, but her knowing smile remained. The garden across the street was taking shape. Daniel had cleared all the weeds and planted rows of flowers. There were bright yellow marigolds and purple lavender. He built wooden benches from reclaimed lumber. Emma watched the transformation with wonder. The empty lot was becoming something beautiful. One evening, as Emma was closing the cafe, Daniel appeared at the door. He looked nervous. He asked if she would like to see the garden up close. Emma grabbed her keys and locked the door behind her. They crossed the street together. The evening light was golden and soft. Daniel led her through the pathways he had created. The air smelled like lavender and fresh earth. Emma ran her fingers over the soft petals of a rose.
This is incredible. You did all this in just a few weeks.
I had good motivation. I wanted to impress someone.
Emma looked up at him. His eyes were gentle, but there was something else there too. Something that made her heart beat faster. She asked who he wanted to impress. Daniel said he thought she already knew. Emma felt warmth flood her face. She had not expected this. She had convinced herself he was just being friendly. But now, standing in his garden with the evening light making everything glow, she could not deny what was happening between them.
I don't know what to say.
You don't have to say anything yet. I just wanted you to know.
They stood there surrounded by flowers. Emma felt a mix of hope and fear. Hope, because Daniel was kind and genuine. Fear, because she had been hurt before. Victoria called Emma that night. She was Emma's oldest friend from college. Victoria had moved to the city and worked in finance. She was practical and sometimes brutally honest. Emma told her about Daniel and the garden. Victoria asked if Emma had looked into who owned the property. Emma admitted she had not thought about it. Victoria said Emma should be careful. She reminded her what happened with her ex who had lied about his job and borrowed money. Emma said Daniel was different. Victoria said everyone thought their situation was different. Emma hung up, feeling conflicted. Victoria meant well, but her cynicism was exhausting. Emma decided to trust her instincts about Daniel. He had never asked her for anything. He showed up every day and worked hard. He brought her basil and built a beautiful garden. The next week brought trouble. Richard, the building owner, arrived at the cafe unannounced. He was a short man with a permanent scowl. He told Emma the rent was increasing by 30% starting next month.
30%? That's impossible. I can barely afford the current rent.
Richard shrugged and said, property values were rising. He said if she could not pay, someone else would. Luxury coffee chains were interested in the space. Emma felt panic rising in her throat. She asked for more time. Richard gave her 2 weeks to decide. After Richard left, Emma sat down and put her head in her hands. She could not afford a 30% increase. She would have to close the cafe. 5 years of work would disappear. Her grandmother's legacy would be gone. Margaret found her crying behind the counter an hour later. Margaret sat beside her and did not ask questions. She just held Emma's hand. Eventually, Emma told her everything. Margaret listened carefully and said she knew some people who might help. Emma appreciated the thought, but she knew Margaret's friends were retired like her. Daniel came by that evening. Emma was wiping down tables with mechanical movements. He could tell something was wrong. He asked what happened. Emma tried to brush it off, but her voice cracked.
The landlord is raising the rent. I can't afford it. I'm going to lose everything.
Daniel set down his work gloves on the counter. He looked at her with such intensity, it made her breath catch. He told her he wanted to help. Emma shook her head and said it was not his problem.
What if I told you I could fix this?
You're a gardener, Daniel. I need thousands of dollars. I appreciate the thought, but this isn't something you can fix with kindness.
Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Emma could see him wrestling with something internal. Finally, he said he needed to tell her something. But before he could continue, Sarah, the owner of the flower shop next door, rushed in. Sarah said there was a fire in the building 2 blocks down. Everyone was evacuating as a precaution. Smoke was visible from the street. Daniel and Emma ran outside. Sure enough, thick gray smoke billowed into the sky. Fire trucks screamed past them. The moment for Daniel's confession had passed. They spent the next hour watching firefighters battle the blaze. The building was an old warehouse that had been converted to apartments. Thankfully, everyone got out safely. But the whole neighborhood smelled like smoke for days. Emma tried to focus on work. She made coffee and served pastries and smiled at customers. But inside, she was calculating numbers over and over. No matter how she added it up, she came up short. She looked at the cafe with new eyes. Every scratch on the counter, every stain on the floor suddenly seemed precious. She was going to lose all of this. Daniel continued working on the garden. Emma noticed he seemed distracted. Several times she caught him staring at his phone with a frown. Once a sleek black car pulled up near the lot. A man in an expensive suit got out and talked to Daniel for several minutes. Emma wondered who it was but did not want to pry. Margaret came in one morning and found Emma crying again. Margaret sat down heavily and told Emma about a time she nearly lost her house. Her husband had died suddenly and left debts no one knew about. Margaret said she felt like her world was ending, but somehow she found a way through. Emma asked how she did it. Margaret said she accepted help from unexpected places. Sometimes pride got in the way of survival. Emma wondered what she meant. That afternoon, Victoria called. She said she had been thinking about Emma's situation. Victoria offered to lend her some money to cover a few months of the increased rent. Emma was touched, but said she could not accept. It would only delay the inevitable. Victoria got frustrated and said Emma was being stubborn. Emma said she was being realistic. They argued for several minutes before Emma apologized. She thanked Victoria for the offer but said no. Victoria sighed and told her to at least think about it. Daniel finally cornered Emma after she closed the cafe one evening. The sun was setting, and the sky was painted orange and pink. He asked if they could talk. Emma nodded, and they sat on one of the garden benches.
I need to be honest with you about something.
Emma felt her stomach tighten. She had learned that sentences starting with "I need to be honest" rarely ended well. She braced herself. Daniel took a deep breath.
I'm not just a gardener. I mean, I am, but that's not all I am.
What do you mean?
Before Daniel could answer, his phone rang. He looked at the screen, and his face changed. He apologized and said he had to take this call. He walked a few steps away. Emma could hear his voice but not the words. He sounded tense and professional, completely different from his usual gentle tone. When he came back, he looked stressed. He told her something came up and he had to leave. He promised they would talk soon. Emma felt confused and a little hurt. She watched him hurry to his old truck and drive away. The next few days, Daniel barely came to the garden. When he did show up, he seemed distracted. He would work for an hour then leave abruptly. Emma told herself not to take it personally. Everyone had their own problems. But she missed their morning coffee talks. Richard showed up again with exactly 1 week until her deadline. He asked if she had made a decision. Emma said she needed the full 2 weeks. Richard smirked and said it would not matter. She clearly could not afford the new rate. He suggested she start looking for a new location. After he left, Emma called her bank. She asked about a loan. The banker was sympathetic, but said her current debt-to-income ratio would not qualify her. Emma thanked him and hung up. She sat in the empty cafe and let herself feel defeated. Maybe it was time to give up. Margaret arrived as usual the next morning. She took one look at Emma and asked what was wrong now. Emma told her about the loan denial. Margaret said she had an idea. She said there was a community meeting that evening about neighborhood development. The person who bought the empty lot would be there. Maybe Emma could appeal to them for help.
I can't just ask a stranger for money, Margaret. That's humiliating.
Margaret said pride would not pay the rent. Sometimes asking for help was the bravest thing a person could do. Emma knew she was right, but the thought made her feel sick. That evening, Emma forced herself to attend the meeting. It was held in the community center down the street. About 30 people sat in folding chairs. Emma recognized most of them as neighbors and local business owners. She sat in the back row next to Sarah from the flower shop. The meeting started with introductions. A woman from the city planning office talked about new developments. Then, she introduced the owner of the garden project. Emma's heart stopped. Daniel walked to the front of the room. But this Daniel looked completely different. He wore a tailored dark suit and polished shoes. His hair was neatly combed back. He carried himself with quiet authority. The woman introduced him as Daniel Harrison, the CEO of Harrison Properties, one of the largest real estate development companies in the city. Emma felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. This could not be real. Daniel the gardener in worn jeans was actually a billionaire real estate developer. The man she had been bringing coffee to every morning owned half the buildings in the neighborhood. She felt her face grow hot with embarrassment and anger. Daniel began speaking about his vision for the community. He talked about preserving neighborhood character while improving infrastructure. He mentioned the garden as an example of his commitment. His voice was confident and professional. Emma barely heard the words. She stood up abruptly and walked out. People turned to look, but she did not care. She needed air. She needed to think. She needed to get away from Daniel's voice. Outside, she leaned against the building and tried to slow her breathing. Why had he lied to her? Why had he pretended to be a simple gardener? Was this all some kind of game to him? She felt tears of frustration burning behind her eyes. The door opened behind her. She knew it was Daniel before he spoke. She could feel his presence.
Emma, please let me explain.
Explain what exactly? That you've been lying to me for weeks. That you let me bring you coffee like you were some struggling worker. That you probably own my building too.
Daniel flinched at her words. He said he did own her building. He had bought it 6 months ago. Emma felt like she had been punched in the stomach.
So this was all what? Some kind of experiment. Rich guy plays poor to see how the little people live.
No, Emma, it wasn't like that.
Emma laughed bitterly. She said it was exactly like that. She asked how long he planned to keep up the act. Daniel said he had been trying to tell her for days.
But you didn't. You let me pour my heart out to you. I told you I was going to lose my cafe. You knew the whole time that you controlled whether that happened.
Daniel reached for her hand, but she pulled away. He said he fell for her. That was never part of any plan. He said he came to the neighborhood to scout properties. He always did his own fieldwork before buying. He wanted to see places as they really were. He said he had noticed her cafe immediately. He saw how she treated every customer like family. He saw how hard she worked. He decided to create the garden to bring more foot traffic to her business.
You expect me to believe that? You expect me to believe this wasn't all some elaborate manipulation?
Daniel's jaw tightened. He said he understood she was angry. But he needed her to know his feelings were real. Everything between them was real. Emma shook her head. She said she did not know what was real anymore. She walked away without looking back. Daniel did not follow her. Emma went home to her small apartment above a laundromat. She climbed the stairs and locked herself inside. Then she let herself cry. She had been such a fool, falling for the kind gardener with dirt under his nail. Meanwhile, he probably had a penthouse overlooking the city. He probably had staff and drivers and a life she could not even imagine. And he had been playing pretend with her. Her phone rang several times. She knew it was Daniel, but she did not answer. Eventually, the call stopped. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Sleep did not come easily. The next morning, Emma opened the cafe on autopilot. She made coffee and set out pastries. Margaret came in and immediately knew something was wrong. Emma told her everything. Margaret listened without interrupting. When Emma finished, Margaret asked one question. Did Emma think Daniel's feelings were fake? Emma said she did not know. Margaret said, that was the only question that mattered. Rich or poor people's hearts work the same way.
But he lied to me.
Margaret agreed that was serious. But she asked if Emma had ever held back truth from someone because she was afraid. Emma thought about all the times she had not told people about her struggles. She had hidden her financial problems from Victoria. She had pretended everything was fine when it was not. Margaret said fear made people do foolish things. Maybe Daniel was afraid Emma would treat him differently if she knew. Maybe he was afraid she would only see his money, and not him. Emma wanted to argue, but the words stuck in her throat. Victoria called that afternoon. She had somehow already heard about Daniel through her business connections. She said she knew Harrison Properties. They were legitimate, and Daniel had a reputation for fair dealings. Victoria said Emma should be careful, but maybe give him a chance to explain properly. Emma was surprised by Victoria's response. She had expected her friend to tell her to run. Victoria laughed and said even she had to admit when something might be real. She told Emma to listen to her gut. Emma's gut was a confused mess. 3 days passed. Emma had not seen Daniel at all. The garden sat finished and beautiful, but it felt empty without him there. Thomas, his assistant, showed up once to water the plants. Thomas looked uncomfortable when he saw Emma. He said Daniel had asked him to maintain the garden. He said Daniel did not want her to worry about it. Emma felt a pang in her chest. Even now, he was thinking about her. She asked Thomas how Daniel was. Thomas hesitated, then said honestly that Daniel was miserable. He said he had never seen his boss like this. Daniel barely slept and was not eating properly. Emma tried to feel satisfaction but instead felt guilty. She thanked Thomas and went back inside. Margaret was watching her with those knowing eyes. Emma ignored her and busied herself with cleaning. That evening, as Emma was closing up, a courier arrived. He handed her a large envelope. Inside was a letter and legal documents. Emma's hands shook as she read. The letter was from Daniel. His handwriting was messy but readable. He apologized for the deception. He explained he had been hurt badly in the past by people who only wanted his money. He had learned to hide who he was to find genuine connections. He said meeting Emma had changed everything. Her kindness was real. Her passion for her cafe was real. He fell in love with who she was, not what she wanted from him. He understood if she could never forgive him. But he wanted to help anyway. The legal documents were a new lease for the cafe. No rent increase. A 5-year guarantee at the current rate. Daniel had overridden Richard's demands. He was giving her the stability she desperately needed. No strings attached. Emma sat down hard on the nearest chair. She read the letter 3 more times. His words felt sincere. The lease felt like trust. He was offering help without asking for anything in return. She thought about all their conversations. The way he listened when she talked. The way he brought her basil without being asked. The way he looked at her in the garden that evening. Had those moments been lies? Her heart said no. Margaret walked in and found Emma holding the papers. Emma showed her everything. Margaret read carefully, then smiled. She said, that was the gesture of someone who truly cared. Emma asked what she should do. Margaret said only Emma could answer that. Emma lay awake again that night. But this time she was not crying. She was thinking. She was remembering every moment with Daniel. Trying to separate what was real from what was performance. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized it had all been real. His laugh when she made a terrible joke. His gentleness when she talked about her grandmother. The way his eyes lit up when she brought him coffee. Those were not things a person could fake convincingly for weeks. Rich people could hire actors, but they could not purchase genuine emotion. She thought about her own behavior too. She had judged him the moment she learned he was wealthy. She had assumed the worst. She had not given him a chance to explain. Margaret was right. Fear made people do foolish things. Daniel's fear made him hide his identity. Emma's fear made her run away. The question was whether she was brave enough to stop running, whether she could trust him despite the rocky start, whether she could forgive him for the lie and forgive herself for judging too quickly. Victoria's words echoed in her mind. Listen to your gut. Emma's gut was finally clear. It was telling her that real love was rare. It was telling her that Daniel's actions spoke louder than his initial deception. It was telling her to take a risk. The next morning, Emma woke up with a plan. She got dressed carefully. She put on her favorite blue dress. She even wore the necklace her grandmother had given her. She opened the cafe as usual. Margaret came in and saw her outfit. Margaret grinned and told her she was doing the right thing. Emma made a fresh pot of coffee. She put 2 cups on a tray. She walked across the street to the garden. Daniel was there. He was kneeling by a flower bed pulling weeds. He wore his old jeans and faded shirt. His truck was parked nearby. He looked up as she approached. His face showed surprise, then hope, then fear, all in quick succession. Emma set down the tray on the nearest bench. She poured coffee into both cups.
I thought you might want some coffee. You've been working since sunrise.
Daniel stood slowly. He wiped his hands on his jeans. His eyes were searching her face, trying to understand.
Emma,
Let me talk first. I read your letter. I signed the lease. Thank you for that.
Daniel shook his head. He said she did not have to thank him. He said he should have told her the truth from the beginning. Emma agreed. She said yes, he should have. But she understood why he did not. She told him about her ex-boyfriend who had lied about having a job, who had borrowed money and never paid it back, who had used her trust against her. She said she built walls after that. She was afraid to let anyone close. When she learned Daniel's secret, those old walls shot back up.
I've been thinking. You didn't ask me for anything. You gave me help with no expectations. That's not what users do. That's what good people do.
Daniel's eyes were bright with emotion. He said he never meant to hurt her. Emma said she knew that now. She asked if they could start over. Honestly this time.
I would like that more than anything.
Emma handed him a cup of coffee. They stood there in his garden drinking coffee just like they had done so many mornings before. But this time, there were no secrets between them. This time, everything was out in the open.
So tell me, what does a billionaire real estate developer actually do all day?
Daniel laughed. It was the first time she had heard him laugh in days. He said mostly boring meetings and paperwork. But on the weekends, he liked to work in gardens. It kept him connected to simple things. Emma smiled and said she could understand that. They talked for over an hour. Daniel told her about his company and his family. His parents had been immigrants who worked multiple jobs. They taught him the value of hard work and honesty. When he made his fortune, he never forgot where he came from. He said that was why he always did his own field work. He wanted to see neighborhoods as real people lived in them, not through reports and statistics. He wanted to make decisions that helped communities, not just maximize profits. Emma told him more about her grandmother. How she had been tough, but loving. How she had believed Emma could do anything. How much it meant to carry on her legacy through the cafe. Daniel listened with full attention. Eventually, Emma had to get back to work. Customers would be arriving soon. Daniel asked if he could come by later. Maybe take her to dinner. A proper date this time. Emma said yes. Their first real date was that Friday evening. Daniel picked her up in a car that was not his old truck. It was a sleek silver sedan that probably cost more than Emma's entire apartment. She felt nervous getting in. The leather seats were spotless, and the dashboard looked like a spaceship control panel.
I know this is different from the truck. We can take the truck if you prefer.
No. This is fine. I'm just adjusting.
Daniel drove them to a restaurant on the waterfront. It was elegant, but not pretentious. The hostess greeted Daniel by name. They were led to a private table with a view of the harbor. Emma watched boats drift past with their lights twinkling. Dinner was excellent, but Emma barely tasted it. She was too aware of everything being different now. Daniel ordered wine without looking at prices. The waiter treated him with special deference. This was his world, and Emma felt like a visitor.
You're quiet tonight. Are you okay?
I'm fine. Just thinking.
Daniel reached across the table and took her hand. His touch was warm and familiar. She looked at him and saw the same person who had pulled weeds in worn jeans. The same person who had brought her basil. Maybe the setting was different, but he was still Daniel. After dinner, they walked along the harbor. The night air was cool and full of salt. Daniel took off his jacket and put it around her shoulders. Emma leaned into him and felt some of her nervousness fade.
Can I ask you something?
Anything.
Why did you really buy my building? Was it just business, or was there more to it?
Daniel was quiet for a moment. They stopped walking, and he turned to face her. The harbor lights reflected in his eyes.
I bought it because I saw you through the window. You were making coffee and singing to yourself. You looked so content. I wanted to know what it felt like to be that happy doing simple things.
Emma felt her throat tighten with emotion. She had not expected such honesty. Daniel continued and said he had been surrounded by people who wanted things from him his whole adult life. Everyone had an angle. Everyone had a plan. But watching her in that cafe, she was just being herself. Emma kissed him then. Right there on the harbor walkway with boats drifting behind them. Daniel pulled her close, and she felt safe. All her doubts dissolved in that moment. This was real. This mattered. They started seeing each other regularly after that. Daniel would come to the cafe in the mornings before work. Emma would meet him for lunch when she could get away. They spent evenings walking through the garden or cooking dinner together. Margaret watched their relationship blossom with obvious delight. One morning, Victoria showed up at the cafe, unannounced. She had driven 2 hours from her city apartment. Emma was surprised, but happy to see her. Victoria ordered an expensive latte and sat at the counter. Victoria said she wanted to meet Daniel properly. She said she had looked into Harrison Properties and everything checked out. But she still wanted to see them together. Emma laughed and said Victoria was being protective. Victoria said someone had to be. Daniel arrived 30 minutes later. Emma introduced them formally. Victoria studied him with sharp eyes. She asked him direct questions about his business and his intentions. Daniel answered honestly without getting defensive. Emma appreciated that he took Victoria's concerns seriously. After an hour, Victoria declared him acceptable. Daniel grinned and said he was relieved. Victoria told Emma privately that he seemed genuine. She said to be careful, but also to be happy. Emma hugged her friend and thanked her for caring. Things were going well, until the morning Thomas showed up looking panicked. He found Daniel at the cafe having coffee with Emma. Thomas apologized for interrupting, but said there was a problem. Someone had leaked to the press about Daniel's relationship with Emma. A business reporter had written an article questioning whether Daniel was involved in predatory development. The article suggested he had manipulated a struggling business owner into a romantic relationship. It painted Emma as a victim and Daniel as a calculating corporate villain.
That's not true. None of that is true.
Thomas said he knew that. But the article was gaining traction online. People loved a scandal involving wealthy developers. Daniel's face was tight with anger. He said he knew who was behind this. Richard, the former building manager, had connections with that reporter. Sure enough, Richard had given an interview. He claimed Daniel had forced him out to install his girlfriend's business. He said Emma was getting preferential treatment. He painted himself as a victim of corporate greed. None of it was true, but truth did not always matter in the court of public opinion. Emma felt sick reading the article. Her phone started ringing with calls from people she barely knew. Other business owners in the neighborhood were asking questions. Some were supportive, but others seemed suspicious. She felt like her privacy had been violated.
I'm going to fix this. I'll sue for defamation. I'll make sure everyone knows the truth.
Suing will just make it a bigger story. We need to think about this carefully.
Margaret arrived and read the article on Emma's phone. She snorted and said Richard had always been a weasel. She told them to ignore it. People who mattered would know the truth. People who believed gossip were not worth worrying about. But Emma could not ignore it that easily. Customers came in that day with curious eyes. Some asked pointed questions. Others whispered to each other while looking at her. Emma tried to stay professional, but she felt exposed. That evening, a reporter showed up at the cafe. She had a camera crew with her. She asked if Emma would comment on her relationship with Daniel Harrison. Emma said she had nothing to say. The reporter kept pushing. She asked if Emma felt used. She asked if the relationship was real or transactional.
Please leave. This is a private business.
The reporter refused. She said the public had a right to know. Emma felt anger rise in her chest. She was about to lose her temper when Daniel walked in. He positioned himself between Emma and the camera.
She asked you to leave. If you don't, I'll call the police for trespassing.
The reporter tried to interview Daniel instead. He repeated his statement calmly. Finally, she left with her crew. Emma collapsed into a chair. Daniel knelt beside her.
I'm so sorry. This is my fault. I brought this into your life.
It's not your fault. Richard did this. But I hate feeling like everyone is judging us.
Daniel said they could release a statement. Explain the timeline. Show that their relationship was genuine. Emma was not sure that would help. Once people believed a story, it was hard to change their minds. Sarah from the flower shop called that night. She said she believed Emma completely. She said most of the neighborhood supported them. Richard had not been popular, and people remembered that. Emma felt grateful for the support, but still shaken. The next few days were difficult. The article kept circulating online. Daniel's company released an official statement denying the allegations. They provided documentation showing Richard had been terminated for policy violations months before Daniel met Emma. They showed the timeline proved Richard's claims were false. Slowly, the story died down. A few news outlets printed corrections. Most just moved on to the next scandal. Richard disappeared from the neighborhood. Emma heard he had moved to another city. She hoped he would stay gone. One Sunday afternoon, Daniel took Emma to meet his sister. Her name was Lisa, and she lived in a suburban house with her husband and 2 kids. Emma was nervous the entire drive. This felt significant. Meeting family was a big step. Lisa opened the door with a huge smile. She hugged Emma immediately. Her house was warm and chaotic with toys everywhere. Her children were 6 and 8 years old. They were excited to meet Uncle Daniel's girlfriend. Lisa pulled Emma aside while Daniel played with the kids in the backyard. She said she had never seen her brother this happy. She said he had dated before but never brought anyone to meet her. Emma felt touched and nervous at the same time. Lisa said Daniel had been hurt badly by his ex-fiancée. She had been with him for 3 years. Daniel thought they were building a life together. Then he discovered she'd been planning to leave him all along. She just wanted to secure a large settlement through marriage. Lisa said after that Daniel became guarded. He threw himself into work. He stopped trusting people. Seeing him smile again meant everything to her. Emma promised to take care of his heart. Lisa hugged her and said that was all she needed to hear. Dinner with Lisa's family was lovely. They ate pasta and played board games. The children demanded Emma tell them stories about the cafe. She told them about Margaret and her purple umbrella. She told them about the time a customer's dog ate an entire tray of muffins. They laughed until their sides hurt. Driving home that night, Emma felt peaceful. She looked at Daniel and thought about how much had changed. A few months ago, she was alone and struggling. Now she had him. She had stability. She had hope.
What are you thinking about?
How lucky I am.
Daniel reached over and squeezed her hand. He said he was the lucky one. Emma disagreed playfully. They argued about who was luckier until they were both laughing. But their peace was interrupted again 2 weeks later. Daniel came to the cafe looking troubled. He asked if they could talk privately. They went upstairs to Emma's apartment. Daniel paced back and forth.
My company has an opportunity. A major development project downtown. Luxury apartments and retail space. It could be worth millions.
That sounds good. Why do you look worried?
Daniel explained the project required demolishing several old buildings. One of them was a community center. Another was an affordable housing complex. The residents would be relocated, but he knew many did not want to leave. It was their home. Daniel said the board of directors was pushing hard for the project. The profit margins were huge, but he was not sure it was the right thing to do. He had been visiting the area, talking to residents, hearing their stories.
I built my company on the principle of helping communities, not destroying them. But this project could secure our financial future for years. I don't know what to do.
Emma sat beside him. She understood his conflict. This was not a simple business decision. This was about his values, about who he wanted to be.
What does your gut tell you?
My gut says walk away. My accountants say take the deal.
Money comes and goes. But you have to live with your choices.
Daniel looked at her with such intensity. He said she always knew the right thing to say. Emma laughed and said she was just repeating what her grandmother used to tell her. Do the right thing even when it is hard. Especially when it is hard. Daniel decided to turn down the project. His board was furious. 2 directors resigned in protest. The company stock dropped briefly. But Daniel stood firm. He announced Harrison Properties would focus on sustainable development that supported existing communities. The decision made headlines. This time, the coverage was positive. Business magazines praised his ethical stance. Community activists applauded him. Emma felt proud watching him handle the pressure. Margaret told Emma she had found herself a good man. Emma agreed completely. Margaret said she had been watching young people for 78 years. She could spot genuine character. Daniel had it. Autumn arrived and the garden became spectacular. The leaves turned gold and red. Daniel had planted mums that bloomed in brilliant orange. Emma loved sitting on the benches reading while Daniel worked. One Saturday afternoon they were in the garden together. Emma was reading a novel. Daniel was trimming hedges. Thomas showed up looking nervous. He had a small box in his hand. Thomas handed the box to Daniel. Daniel opened it and checked inside. Emma was curious, but did not want to pry. Thomas left quickly. Daniel sat down beside her on the bench.
Emma, can I tell you something?
Of course.
Daniel took a deep breath. He said these past months had been the happiest of his life. He said she made him want to be better. She reminded him what mattered. Emma felt her heart start to race.
I know we haven't been together that long, and I know we had a rough start, but I can't imagine my life without you anymore.
He pulled out the small box Thomas had brought. Inside was a simple ring. A single diamond on a gold band. Emma's hand flew to her mouth.
I'm not asking you to marry me today. I'm asking if you would consider it. If you would wear this as a promise that we're building towards something real.
Emma felt tears streaming down her face. She had not expected this. But looking at Daniel, she knew her answer. She had known for weeks if she was honest. This man had shown her who he was through actions, not just words.
Yes. Absolutely yes.
Daniel slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. He pulled her close and kissed her. Emma felt like her heart might burst. She had been so scared to trust again. But Daniel had proven himself worthy of that trust. They told Margaret first. She cried happy tears and hugged them both. She said she knew this would happen. She said young love was beautiful, but mature love, built on honesty, was rare. Emma agreed. Lisa was thrilled when Daniel called her. She insisted they come to dinner immediately. Her children made congratulations cards with crayons. Lisa's husband opened champagne. It was a perfect celebration. Victoria drove down the next weekend. She examined the ring critically. Then she smiled and said it was lovely. She told Daniel if he ever hurt Emma, she would destroy him professionally. Daniel said he would expect nothing less. Victoria approved. The neighborhood celebrated too. Sarah brought flowers to the cafe. Other business owners stopped by with congratulations. Even people Emma barely knew seemed genuinely happy. The cafe felt full of joy. But Emma noticed Daniel seemed stressed despite the happiness. He was working longer hours. He came home exhausted. She asked what was wrong. Daniel admitted the company was facing new challenges after losing the directors. Some investors were nervous about his ethical stance. They worried he would turn down too many profitable projects. Daniel was trying to prove he could be both ethical and successful. It was exhausting.
Maybe you need a break. When was the last time you took a vacation?
I can't remember.
Emma suggested they take a long weekend. Go somewhere quiet. Just the two of them. Daniel said he would think about it. A week later, Daniel surprised her. He had booked a cabin in the mountains. 3 days with no phones and no work. Just them and nature. Emma was excited. The cabin was perfect. It was small and rustic with a wood-burning stove. A stream ran nearby. The trees were in full autumn color. They spent their days hiking and their evenings cooking together. One evening they sat on the porch wrapped in blankets. The stars were brilliant overhead. Emma had never seen so many stars. Daniel pointed out constellations. Emma just enjoyed listening to his voice.
I've been thinking about something.
What's that?
Daniel said he wanted to simplify his life. He had too much. Too many properties and investments and responsibilities. He wanted to focus on things that mattered. The garden project. Community development. Emma asked what that meant practically. Daniel said he was considering stepping back from day-to-day operations. Hiring someone else to run the company. He would stay on as chairman but not CEO. It would give him freedom.
Would you be happy doing that?
I think so. I've been so focused on building and expanding. I forgot to ask why I was doing it.
Emma understood that feeling. She had been so focused on keeping the cafe open. She forgot to enjoy running it. Maybe they both needed to reassess what success meant. They talked late into the night, making plans and dreaming together. Emma suggested Daniel could work more on garden projects. Create green spaces throughout the city. Daniel loved that idea. He said they could do it together. When they returned home, Daniel made his announcement. He was promoting Thomas to CEO. Thomas was young but brilliant and shared Daniel's values. Daniel would remain chairman but focus on community projects. The board was surprised but ultimately agreed. Thomas was terrified and excited. He thanked Daniel for the opportunity. Daniel said he trusted him completely. Emma watched the transition happen and felt proud of Daniel's courage. It took strength to let go of control. With more free time, Daniel spent mornings at the cafe with Emma. He helped serve customers. He learned to make coffee properly. The regulars loved seeing him there. Margaret taught him how to frost cupcakes. He was terrible at it, but enthusiastic. One morning, Daniel was attempting to frost a batch of cupcakes. He had frosting on his nose and in his hair. Emma was laughing so hard she could barely breathe. Margaret walked in and shook her head. Margaret said she had seen many things in her 78 years. But a billionaire covered in buttercream was a new one. Daniel grinned and wiped frosting on Margaret's arm. She swatted him with a dish towel. Emma captured the moment on her phone. Customers were amused by the scene. One regular joked that Daniel should stick to gardening. Daniel agreed completely. He handed the frosting duties back to Emma. She kissed his frosting-covered nose. Winter arrived and brought snow. The garden looked magical, covered in white. Daniel and Emma bundled up and walked through it. Their breath made clouds in the cold air. Daniel pulled her close to keep her warm. Emma thought about how much had changed in 1 year. Last winter she was alone and struggling. This winter, she had Daniel and security and hope. She looked at the garden Daniel had created. It was more than just flowers and paths. It was proof that beautiful things could grow from nothing. They started making plans for their wedding. Nothing too large or elaborate. Just close friends and family in the garden. Maybe in spring when everything was blooming. Margaret insisted on making the cake. Lisa offered to help with decorations. Victoria said she would handle the legal aspects. She wanted to make sure all the paperwork was perfect. Daniel laughed and said he appreciated her thoroughness. Victoria said someone had to keep them organized. One evening, Emma was closing the cafe alone. Daniel had a late meeting with the city planning office about a new garden project. She was wiping down tables when the door opened. She looked up expecting to tell someone they were closed. A woman stood in the doorway. She was beautiful and expensively dressed. Her coat probably cost more than Emma's rent. She looked around the cafe with barely concealed disdain. The woman asked if Emma was the owner. Emma said yes and asked if she could help. The woman introduced herself as Christine, Daniel's ex-fiancée. Emma felt her stomach drop. Christine said she heard about the engagement. She wanted to meet the woman who caught Daniel. Her tone was mocking. Emma felt defensive, but tried to stay calm.
Daniel is at a meeting. If you want to see him, you should call.
Christine laughed. She said she did not want to see Daniel. She wanted to give Emma some advice. Woman to woman. Emma did not want advice from this person, but curiosity kept her listening. Christine said Daniel seemed perfect at first, generous and kind and attentive. But eventually, his true nature would show. He was controlling. He needed to be in charge of everything. He would try to change Emma into what he wanted.
I don't believe that. And I think you should leave.
Christine moved closer. She said Emma was naive. She said Daniel was good at playing the hero. But heroes eventually revealed themselves to be human, flawed and disappointing. She said she was trying to save Emma from making a mistake. Emma felt anger rising. This woman did not know anything about their relationship. She did not know how Daniel had proven himself, how he had supported Emma without expectations, how he had changed his entire life philosophy.
You don't know him anymore. People change. And whatever happened between you is not my concern.
Christine's expression turned cold. She said Emma would see eventually. Daniel always returned to type. He could not help himself. Then she left without another word. Emma locked the door behind her with shaking hands. She did not believe Christine. But doubt was insidious. It crept in through tiny cracks. She tried to push it away. Daniel arrived 30 minutes later. He found Emma sitting in the dark cafe. He immediately knew something was wrong. Emma told him about Christine's visit. Daniel's face darkened with anger.
I'm sorry. She had no right to come here.
She said you were controlling. That you would try to change me.
Daniel sat down across from her. He took her hands. His eyes were sincere and open.
Christine and I were wrong for each other from the start. I tried to make it work, but we wanted different things. She thought I was controlling because I had opinions. I thought she was dishonest because she hid things. We brought out the worst in each other.
He said their relationship had taught him what he did not want. He did not want someone who agreed with everything he said. He wanted someone who challenged him. Someone with their own dreams and opinions. Someone like Emma.
Have I ever felt controlled to you?
Emma thought about it honestly. Daniel had offered help but never demanded anything. He supported her decisions, even when he worried. He asked her opinion on everything. He made her feel like an equal partner.
No. You've never made me feel that way.
And I never will. I fell in love with who you are. I don't want to change that.
Emma believed him. She could see the truth in his eyes. Christine was bitter and trying to poison something good. Emma would not let her succeed. She kissed Daniel and pushed all doubts away. Spring arrived and brought new life to the garden. The wedding preparations were almost complete. Emma had found a simple white dress she loved. Daniel wore a dark suit that made him look impossibly handsome. Margaret had outdone herself with a 3-tier lemon cake. The wedding day was perfect. The sky was clear and blue. Flowers bloomed everywhere. Chairs were arranged in neat rows. About 50 people came, friends and family and neighborhood regulars. Emma walked down the makeshift aisle with tears in her eyes. Daniel waited at the end, looking nervous and happy. Lisa was crying already. Victoria stood as Emma's maid of honor, looking elegant and slightly emotional. Thomas was Daniel's best man. The ceremony was short and sweet. They wrote their own vows. Daniel promised to support her dreams and never take her for granted. Emma promised to challenge him and keep him grounded. They promised to face whatever came together. When they kissed, everyone cheered. Margaret threw rose petals. The children from Lisa's family ran around chasing each other. It was chaotic and perfect, and exactly what Emma wanted. The reception was held in the cafe. They had pushed tables together and hung string lights. Music played from someone's phone. People danced and laughed and ate too much cake. Emma looked around and felt overwhelming gratitude. She had started this year alone and scared. She ended it, surrounded by love. Daniel found her standing by the window. He wrapped his arms around her from behind.
Happy.
Completely.
They danced slowly, even though the music was upbeat. Emma rested her head on his chest. She could hear his heartbeat steady and strong. This was home. Not the cafe or the apartment. This feeling right here. Margaret caught the bouquet despite not really trying. She laughed and said at 78 she was done with romance. But maybe she would keep it for luck. Everyone toasted to that. As the evening wound down, guests started leaving. They hugged Emma and Daniel and wished them well. Victoria whispered to Emma that she was glad to be wrong. Wrong about Daniel being too good to be true. Emma hugged her tight. Lisa took her children home. They were exhausted but happy. Sarah cleaned up the flower arrangements. Thomas made sure everything was locked up properly. Finally, it was just Emma and Daniel and Margaret. Margaret hugged them both. She said she had watched their love story unfold with great joy. She said true love was rare and precious. She made them promise to never take it for granted. They promised. After Margaret left, Emma and Daniel sat in the empty cafe. The string lights cast a warm glow. Half-eaten cake sat on the counter. Shoes were scattered where people had kicked them off to dance.
We should clean this up.
Or we could leave it until tomorrow.
Emma agreed. They were too tired and too happy to care about mess. Daniel pulled her close again. They swayed together, without music, just breathing together in the quiet. Emma thought about the journey that brought them here. The struggles and doubts. The revelations and growth. The choice to trust despite fear. All of it had been worth it for this moment.
What are you thinking about?
How you changed my life.
Daniel said she had changed his too. She taught him what really mattered. Not money or success or control, but connection and honesty and love. Emma smiled against his chest. They eventually went upstairs to Emma's apartment. Soon they would move to a house Daniel had bought. It was modest by his standards, but spacious and warm. It had a big kitchen where Emma could experiment with new recipes. It had a garden where Daniel could work. But tonight, they were still in her little apartment. The place where she had cried over rent. The place where she had read his letter. The place where she had decided to take a risk. It would always be special because of that. Weeks turned into months. Married life suited them both. Emma expanded the cafe menu. Daniel worked on 3 new garden projects across the city. They fell into comfortable rhythms. Margaret remained their favorite customer. She came every morning and offered unsolicited advice. They loved her for it. She had become like family. One morning, Emma felt unusually tired. She thought she was coming down with something. But the tiredness persisted for days. Margaret noticed and suggested she see a doctor. Emma made an appointment. The doctor ran some tests. When the results came back, Emma sat in shock. She was pregnant. She had not been trying, but she was not preventing it either. She felt a rush of emotions. Joy and fear and excitement all mixed together. She told Daniel that evening in the garden. He was planting new roses. She walked up behind him and just said the words. Daniel dropped his trowel. He turned to look at her.
Are you serious?
Completely serious.
He picked her up and spun her around. Then he carefully set her down, worried he might hurt her. Emma laughed at his sudden caution. Daniel kept asking if she was okay, if she needed anything, if she wanted to sit down. Emma said she was fine. She was just pregnant, not fragile. But she appreciated his concern. They sat on a bench holding hands, talking about the future in new ways. A baby would change everything. But they were ready. They told their families that weekend. Lisa cried happy tears again. Her children were excited about a new cousin. Margaret declared herself honorary grandmother. Victoria calculated due dates and started planning. The pregnancy was relatively easy. Emma felt tired and nauseous at first. But by the second trimester, she felt better. She kept working at the cafe. Regular customers brought her gifts. Baby clothes and blankets and toys. Daniel became even more protective. He insisted on driving her everywhere. He researched everything about pregnancy and childbirth. Emma found it endearing and occasionally annoying, but mostly endearing. They prepared the nursery together. Daniel painted it a soft yellow. Emma picked out furniture. They argued playfully about names. Daniel wanted classic names. Emma preferred unique ones. They agreed to wait until they met the baby to decide. Winter came again. Emma's due date approached. She waddled around the cafe making customers laugh. Margaret told her she looked beautiful. Emma felt huge and uncomfortable, but happy. On a snowy January morning, Emma's water broke. She was at the cafe naturally. Margaret called Daniel immediately. He arrived in record time, looking panicked. They rushed to the hospital. Labor was long and difficult. Emma had never felt such pain. Daniel held her hand the entire time. He whispered encouragement. He wiped her forehead. He did not leave even when she squeezed his hand hard enough to hurt. After 16 hours, their daughter was born. She was tiny and perfect. Dark hair and searching eyes. Emma held her and felt complete. Daniel cried openly. He touched the baby's tiny fingers with wonder. They named her Rose, after the first flower Daniel had planted in their garden. Rose Harrison sounded right. Strong and beautiful. The first few weeks were exhausting. Rose needed constant attention. Emma and Daniel took turns with night feedings. They were both sleep-deprived and overwhelmed. But every time Rose smiled or made a tiny sound, they forgot their exhaustion. Margaret came to visit often. She held Rose with experienced hands. She gave advice without being pushy. She made sure Emma ate properly. Emma did not know what she would do without her. Lisa brought her children over. They wanted to meet their baby cousin. They were gentle and curious. Emma watched Daniel with Rose and her nieces and nephews. He was a natural father, patient and loving. The cafe had to close temporarily. Emma needed time to adjust to motherhood. Her regular customers understood. They sent cards and gifts. They promised to come back when she reopened. After 3 months, Emma felt ready. She hired additional help. A young woman named Jade, who was enthusiastic and hardworking. Jade could handle mornings while Emma stayed home with Rose. Emma would come in for afternoons when Daniel could watch the baby. It was not perfect, but it worked. Emma missed the constant connection with customers. But she would not trade time with Rose for anything. Balance was possible with effort and flexibility. Daniel scaled back his work even more. He wanted to be present for Rose's first year. Thomas ran the company excellently. Daniel focused on his family and his gardens. He was happier than ever. One spring afternoon they had a picnic in their garden. Rose was 6 months old. She could sit up and grab things. She loved watching butterflies. Emma spread a blanket and unpacked food. Daniel lay on his back with Rose on his chest. She grabbed his nose and laughed. Emma took a photo. She had hundreds of photos already. She could not stop capturing moments.
Do you ever think about that first morning, when I brought you coffee?
All the time.
Emma asked what he had thought when he saw her. Daniel said he thought she looked tired, but determined. He said there was something about her that drew him in. A kindness in her eyes. A strength in how she carried herself.
I thought you were just a poor gardener.
I was just a gardener that day. Everything else did not matter.
Emma understood what he meant. In that moment with coffee and weeds between them. They were just two people connecting. No past or expectations. Just possibility. Rose started fussing. She was hungry. Emma picked her up and nursed her. Daniel watched them with soft eyes. His girls. His whole world. Emma thought about the scared woman she had been. Worried about rent and survival. Convinced she would always be alone. That woman felt like a stranger now. Emma had grown so much. Learned to trust. Learned to be vulnerable. Learned that love was worth the risk. Years would pass. Rose would grow. There would be new challenges and joys. But Emma was not afraid anymore. Whatever came they would face together. That was enough. That was everything. How did you enjoy today's story? Please leave a rating from 1 to 10. Let us know where you're watching from. And if you have a similar experience or personal story, feel free to share it in the comments. Your engagement greatly helps the growth and longevity of this channel. If you subscribe, you'll receive new stories every day. We hope today's episode brought richness to your day. Thank you for watching.